Dear SUSNANO colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to this first training, Module 1, an overview of EU project management. Over the next hour and a quarter, I'm going to be giving an introduction and an overview about different types of EU funding schemes, but going and saying somewhat more about project lifecycle in the context of EU project management. So this is my agenda for this module 1, for this first training. So to begin with, yes, I'll talk about some basics of EU research funding schemes. I'll then talk about project lifecycle overview and about the different phases that are involved in this: initiation phase, planning phase, execution and control phase, closing phase. I'll then say a few words about different types of project management methodologies. And lastly, because it is so important, I'll say some words about roles and responsibility of project teams and project team members. Okay, so to kick off, some words about the basics of EU funding schemes. So I'm sure many of you are already aware of Horizon Europe. So on this slide, in the figure you see, this is like a high-level view of the Horizon Europe funding program. This is a very, very big program with a funding of 95.5 billion euros over the period from 2021 to 2027. So the program's been running for something like 4 years now. As you see in the figure and also from the text on the side, it's structured in these 3 pillars. Pillar 1, excellent science. Pillar 2, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. And Pillar 3, innovative Europe. Now, running at the bottom, you'll also see this horizontal bar where it says widening participation and strengthening European research area. This is also very, very important part of the program for what are known as widening countries. And indeed, it's important to mention that the SUSNANO project itself has been funded from this part of the Horizon Europe program. Collectively, Horizon Europe supports a very, very wide variety of projects and initiatives, everything from sort of fundamental science to close to market innovative products and services and activities. Another program which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with is the Erasmus Plus scheme. So rather like Horizon Europe, it has a funding period from 2021 to 2027. Erasmus is structured in these 4 different columns. There's what's known as Key Action 1, learning mobility of individuals, which I'm sure many students, not only in Albania, but across Europe, will be familiar with from having spent semesters away from their home university in some other part of Europe. That funding would have probably come through Key Action 1 of the Erasmus Plus program. But there's also Key Action 2, which provides funding for cooperation among organizations and instructions. There's Key Action 3, support to policy development and cooperation. And then there are what are known as Jean Monnet actions, which covers things like centers of excellence, chairs, and networks. Another very briefly important funding scheme is collectively what is known as the European Fund for Regional Development, or ERDF for short. This is sort of structured into 2 main strands. There's what is known as investment in employment and growth. And then there's also what's called European Territorial Cooperation, or Interreg. These schemes, they don't only fund research, but if you're fortunate, for a particular area, particular priority, you may also find opportunities for funding research and certainly innovation related projects. So as I said, it's a very, very quick highlight with these last three slides of different EU funding schemes. What I would recommend, if you're interested to have a much more exhaustive listing and information about different EU funding schemes out there, then I strongly recommend you to download this practical guide called EU Learning. On the right-hand side, you see part of the cover of the document, and on the left is the web link where you can download the PDF. As I say, this is a really exhaustive guide. It's several hundred pages long. It covers not only Horizon Europe and Erasmus Plus and ERDF, but also various other schemes, which I'm sure will be of interest for many of you. So much of this presentation is about project management. Also, when I'll be giving the training on Module 2 and Module 3, it's really about project management in the context of EU-funded projects. Perhaps it's worth, for a moment, stepping back and asking ourselves, why, the obvious question, why is project management important? Again, I'm sure many of you will have ideas, but and this slide here with these points is by no means exhaustive, but arguably we could say the following considerations are important. So firstly, funding utilization. If you have good, efficient project management, it helps to ensure that the funding obtained from the funding scheme is used effectively and responsibly, aligning with the proposed budget and thereby reducing wastage of resources. It's also important from the point of view of compliance. So project management helps in ensuring compliance with the rules and regulations set by the EU for these funding schemes, thereby helping to avoid potential legal issues. Project management is also important for time management. So proper management allows for better time management, ensuring that research activities and milestones are completed within the given timelines. Risk management. Project management helps in identifying, assessing, and managing potential risks that may affect the research project's progress or outcomes, thus reducing the likelihood of failure. Another important reason is quality control. So project management practices can help ensure that the project meets the required quality standards and delivers valuable and valid results. We now move on to give an overview about project lifecycle. So with any research project, and indeed many different types of projects, we can think of that project, we can structure that project in these broad phases. So in this figure, going from the left, you see the initiation phase, planning phase, execution and control phase, and closing phase. And in a moment, I'm going to talk and elaborate more about these different phases in the context of a simple use case. So, yes, as I mentioned a moment ago, project life cycle, it refers to different stages a project goes through from inception to completion. In the context of EU research funding schemes, it entails a process of developing a research proposal, of course, securing funding, executing the project, and then evaluating its outcomes. So thinking about these 4 different phases. With the initiation phase, this is the stage where the project idea is formalized. So if we're talking about EU funding schemes, this would often involve identifying a research question that aligns with the priorities of the specific scheme, putting together a project team, and creating an initial project plan that includes objectives, potential impacts, and an overview of work packages. In the planning phase, this will involve detailing the steps required to achieve the project goals. In an EU research funding context, this phase is crucial to prepare a detailed proposal for submission. And indeed, I would argue, and you'll see when I give the training on Module 2, for me, planning phase is very much about preparing and writing the actual project proposal. Execution and control phase. So once funding is secured, the project enters the concurrent execution and control phase. So this involves carrying out the research activities as planned, but it also involves providing regular reporting to the EU funding body as per the scheme's requirements. Then last of all, we have the closing phase. This involves finalizing all activities, completing the documentation, and disseminating the results. In the context of EU-funded research, this often requires a final management report or evaluation to the funding body, demonstrating the achievements and impact of the project. Okay, we've introduced each of these, briefly defined each of these different phases. Let's go through now and talk a little bit more about each phase, and to try to bring it a bit more, to be less abstract, we'll use a simple case study about a sort of agricultural related research project. So starting with the initiation phase. So in this initiation phase, we need to define the project's goals and feasibility. So we need to define the research question. For example, if you had a project in the field of renewable energy technologies, a goal could be developing a novel, cost-effective solar panel. The research question might involve exploring new materials or technologies to increase the efficiency of solar panels. We need to think about alignment with EU priorities. So this is one of the key goals of any EU-funded project. So for instance, a project under Horizon Europe scheme would need to align with the key strategic orientations, such as promoting open innovation, addressing global challenges, or strengthening the European research area. Assessment of technical feasibility. So, for example, if applying for a grant that aims to develop a new medical device for remote monitoring patients, part of the initiation phase would be understanding whether current technology can support the intended functionality. We would need to assess the state of the art in telemedicine and wearable sensors. We also need to assess the economic feasibility. So in a project aiming to develop, for example, a more sustainable agricultural method, a goal might be to produce a crop yield equivalent to current methods, but with, say, 30% less water usage. The feasibility assessment could involve an analysis of potential methods, costs, and return on investment. This would also include potential market size and economic impact. And then the last point on this slide, some sort of assessment of time feasibility. So an important aspect of project initiation is estimating the time needed to achieve the project goals. For instance, a project aiming to develop a vaccine against a new viral disease would need to take into account the time needed for preclinical development, clinical trials, regulatory approval, and production scale-up. Also in this initiation phase, we're going to need to identify who are the project stakeholders and what their interests are. So thinking this through, the different stakeholders, they might be, for example, well, almost certainly they would be the project team members. So these are researchers, scientists, technical staff involved in the project. Their interests lie in successfully completing the project, advancing their careers, and in somehow contributing to their field of study. Another stakeholder would be the funding body. In the case of EU-funded research, the funding body could be the European Commission under schemes like Horizon Europe. Their interest would be ensuring the project aligns with their strategic policy priorities, that it's carried out as planned, and leads to impactful results. Another stakeholder are partner organisations. So if your project involves collaboration with other universities, research institutes, or companies, these are crucial stakeholders. Their interests may include new knowledge, tech transfer, reputational enhancement, or financial benefits. Regulatory bodies is another possible stakeholder. If your project involves activities that require regulatory approval, like clinical trials or environmental impact assessments, regulatory bodies are important stakeholders. Their interests lie in ensuring compliance with laws and regulations. End users or beneficiaries. These, if you're considering a health-related project, these could be patients in case of a medical research project, consumers if you're developing a new product, farmers, for example, in an agricultural project, and so on and so forth. Their interest, of course, is in the successful development and implementation of the project's results. And then lastly, on this slide, we can think about society at large. For projects dealing with societal challenges or public goods, for example, climate change, public health, etc., society at large is a key stakeholder. Their interests lie in contributions to societal well-being, economic growth, or environmental sustainability. Okay, I'm going to now, still within this sort of initiation phase, I'm going to say some words about creating a project charter. So a project charter, also referred to as a project abstract, this serves as a sort of informal contract document between the project team and the sponsor and outlines the scope, objectives, stakeholders, and key deliverables of the project. So typically when you're in this initiation phase and you're trying to develop a project proposal, the vast majority of the time with EU-funded projects, they need to be done in a consortium with partners from other countries in or neighbouring Europe. When you're in this initiation phase and you're approaching these different partners, it's very good to have project charter, also known as a project abstract, to sort of share with them so that they get a clear idea what you're trying to do and where they might be able to fit in to your consortium and your project idea. So with a project charter, and here I'm going to refer to a sort of a simple case study. Let's imagine that you're trying to develop a project proposal about researching sustainable agricultural methods. So in your project charter, which is a fairly short document, you'll obviously need to have the project title. It might be something like promoting water efficiency in agriculture through new irrigation methods. You'll want to say something about the key project objectives. In this case, we could be talking about research and developing a new novel irrigation method that reduces water usage by 30% without affecting crop yields, and to promote its adoption among European farmers. In the charter, you also should say some words about who these key stakeholders are. So there'll be the project team, European Commission, funder, partner universities and research centres, farmers associations, environmental regulatory bodies, potential end users, e.g. farmers. You also want to say what are going to be the expected deliverables, so, or at least the key deliverables that come out of the project. So these will be things like the development and testing of the new irrigation method, research papers documenting the method and its benefits, training materials for farmers, and a final report to the funding body. And then lastly, in your project charter, you'll need to sort of say what's the preliminary timeline. In this case, we're saying it would be a project 3 years in duration. Now, stepping through and thinking about some of the points we raised earlier on about the initiation phase and what it entails, and specifically here about project team, let's sort of think through what does that mean in the case of this case study about researching sustainable agricultural methods. So in our project team, we're going to need a principal investigator. There'll be a seasoned researcher in sustainable agriculture. There'll be someone who's going to guide the research direction, supervise the team, and communicate with the funding body. There'll also be agriculture specialists. These will be team members who will conduct field experiments to test the new irrigation methods. They should have a strong background in crop science and irrigation. Probably be environmental scientists. This role will involve assessing the environmental impact of the new irrigation method, ensuring it aligns with sustainability goals. You'll have an outreach coordinator. This person, their role will focus on communicating with farmer associations and promoting the adoption of the new irrigation method. They should have skills in communication, education, and stakeholder engagement. And then lastly, but certainly not least importantly, you'll have a project manager. That person will be responsible for the overall management of the project, ensuring it stays on track with its timeline and budget, and facilitating communication within the team and with external stakeholders. In this initiation phase, we said that, of course, a key aspect of that is about certainly as you go into the planning phase, is about securing funding. Well, in this initiation phase, we're going to sort of obviously need to be aware of what funding scheme we're going for, or others, but not only the funding, but also other resources, like being aware about how much personnel is required, what equipment, what facilities. So in short, it's vital to identify what resources are needed for the project, where these can be obtained from, and how they can be secured in a timely and cost-effective manner. If we think about our simple case study, researching sustainable agricultural methods, so from the funding perspective, the team might apply for funding under the Horizon Europe scheme, specifically targeting calls related to sustainable agriculture or water efficiency. The grant application would detail the project's aims, approach, potential impacts, and budget. Personnel. The team would need agricultural specialists for field experiments, an environmental scientist for assessing sustainability, and an outreach coordinator for working with farmers. These roles could be filled by existing staff, new hires, or collaborators at partner institutions. Field sites. This is something we'll also, of course, need this vital resource. So for testing the new irrigation method, the team would need access to suitable agricultural land. This might be available through the host institution, partner organizations, or local farmers willing to participate in the research. Initiation phase, as we mentioned earlier on, it also, in your project charter, it's important to sort of identify key deliverables. So these deliverables, of course, will be very much dependent on the nature and scope of the project. Deliverables provide tangible proof of the project's progress and outcomes, which is important for accountability to the funding body, communicating with other stakeholders, and disseminating the results to the wider community. If we think of our case study on researching sustainable agricultural methods, so these project deliverables, they would be things like research publications, peer-reviewed articles detailing the research findings related to the new irrigation method and its benefits. There'll be training materials, instructional resources designed to teach farmers how to implement the new irrigation method. This could be manuals, online courses, video tutorials, and so forth. Field trial reports. So detailed reports on the field trials conducted, including methodology, data analysis, and conclusions, and then some sort of final report to the funding body, which details the project's achievements, use of funds, impact on water efficiency in agriculture, and any potential next steps for further research or implementation. So last slide about the initiation phase. And here it's important to sort of think in this initiation about what can be the challenges, risks, in other words, and developing some sort of mitigation strategy towards addressing those. So it's identifying challenges early on allows the project team to anticipate them, develop strategies to address them, and thus increase the overall chances of project success. If we're thinking about our case study in researching sustainable agricultural methods, what might be such challenges or risks? Well, we can think of field trial challenges. So the field trials could be affected by unpredictable factors like weather conditions, pests, or crop diseases. The team, to sort of try to address this, the team could set up multiple trial sites to mitigate this risk and plan for longer trial periods to account for variability. Adoption by farmers is another potential risk or challenge. So the new irrigation methods might be resisted by farmers due to the cost of implementation or lack of awareness. Outreach activities, training sessions, and demonstrating the cost effectiveness and benefits of the new method could be planned as a mitigation measure from the beginning for this. And then a last sort of potential set of challenges could be delays in funding. So if there were delays in funding, they could impact the project timelines. So having a contingency plan with alternative funding sources or adjusted timelines would be very, very beneficial. So that's enough words for now about the initiation phase. As I said, when we get to the next training session, module 2, we'll be going into a lot more depth about initiation phase and also the planning phase in the specific context of Horizon Europe projects. But for now, we just do a relatively limited number of slides, a relatively limited introduction to these different phases. Anyhow, planning phase. So again, what we'll be doing with this sort of planning phase is we'll try to illustrate it with this sort of case study. So anyway, with our planning phase. So at this point, we're going to be developing a detailed project plan. This is a crucial step in the planning phase of EU-funded research projects. The plan serves as a roadmap for the project, outlining the activities to be performed, the resources required, and the timeline for completion. If we're thinking what this means in the context of our case study and researching sustainable agricultural methods, well, we would need to come up with some sort of work breakdown structure. So the tasks might include, all the different tasks need to be grouped together in their different work packages. Tasks might include literature review, design of the irrigation method, setup of field trials, data collection and analysis, outreach to farmers, etc. Each of these would be broken down into subtasks as needed and required. Resource allocation. So the project plan would detail the personnel, equipment, budget, and other resources required for each task. For instance, the field trials would require agricultural specialists, farmland, irrigation equipment, and a portion of the project budget. Timeline. The project plan would specify when each task should begin and end. For example, the design of the irrigation method might take place in the first 2 months. Field trials, for example, from month 3 to month 24, etc. We also need to think about milestones. So milestones in the project would be marked, so key points which we're trying to achieve, they would be marked as milestones. And these could include, for example, the start of field trials, the completion of data analysis, the first training session for farmers, etc. So in the planning phase, we need to set up the budgeting and scheduling plans. It's crucial to establish these plans. This ensures that the project has the resources it needs to achieve its objectives on time. Budgeting and scheduling plans, they also provide a basis for monitoring project performance and accountability to the funding body and other stakeholders. In the context of our case study, researching sustainable agricultural methods, so the budgeting plan, this would cover things like costs of the field trials, brackets land, seeds, irrigation equipment, etc., personnel costs, overhead costs, outreach activities, publication costs, and so on and so forth. The budget would be distributed across these categories according to their importance and the project's funding constraints. The scheduling plan, on the other hand, for our case study, so this schedule would need to specify the timeline for each task in the project. For example, this might mean designing the irrigation method might take 2 months. We just said that in the previous slide. Setting up and conducting field trials might take us to month 24. Data analysis and report writing might take an additional 6 months. All these main activities, these main work packages, you need to do some kind of scheduling timing for them. Another key thing in the planning phase is we should think about defining some quality metrics and objectives for the project. So defining quality metrics and objectives during the planning phase of an EU-funded research project is vital to ensure the project meets the expected standards and achieves its goals. Quality metrics and objectives provide a clear definition of what constitutes success for the project. They provide a standard against which project performance can be measured and evaluated, which is essential for accountability to the funding body and to other stakeholders. In the context of our case study, researching sustainable agricultural methods, what might these be? Well, water efficiency. So the new irrigation method should achieve a certain percentage of water savings compared to traditional methods. This percentage could be defined as a target objective. Crop yield. Despite the water savings we're aiming to achieve, crop yield should not decrease and ideally should increase. So some sort of target yield per hectare could be defined. Adoption rate. So a certain percentage of the participating farmers should adopt a new irrigation method after the project. This percentage should be set as some sort of target. And then on the publication side, publication quality, the number of high-impact peer-reviewed publications resulting from the research could also be set as a target. So that's some words about the planning phase. We now move on to say some words about execution and control phase. So in this phase, it involves the deployment of resources and execution of the project plan. So resources are deployed, project plan is put into action. This involves coordinating people, materials, conducting project activities, and ensuring tasks are completed as planned. It's, as you can imagine, a very busy phase that requires effective coordination, problem solving, and communication to ensure that the project stays on track and achieves its objectives. In the context of our simple case study on research in sustainable agricultural methods, these are things we'd probably be thinking about. So field trials. The project team begins setting up the field trials. which can involve preparing the land, installing the irrigation equipment, and planting the crops. Data collection. Team members start their assigned tasks, such as designing the data collection protocol, collecting and analyzing data, or conducting outreach to farmers. Collaboration. So Farmers Association or other partners begin their roles in the project, such as promoting the new irrigation method to farmers or providing practical advice. And then lastly, reporting. So the project manager starts tracking progress, documenting activities, and preparing reports for the funding body and other stakeholders. These formal reports will certainly be required at the end of the project, and most probably also at some interim point, maybe halfway through the project. Execution, of course, involves as well the management of teams and their tasks. So this involves ensuring that everyone knows what they need to do, coordinating team activities, resolving any issues that arise, and maintaining a productive and positive work environment. Good team management helps to ensure that project activities are carried out effectively, that team members feel valued and motivated, and that any issues are addressed promptly. If we think of our case study on researching sustainable agricultural methods, so we need to think of the following things. Task allocation. So tasks must be assigned based on the work breakdown structure, our work packages, and team members must be briefed on their roles and deadlines. Field coordination. So the project manager must coordinate field activities, ensure that all necessary resources are available, and troubleshoot any problems that may occur. Performance monitoring. The project manager must track the performance of team members and the quality of their work, providing feedback and guidance as needed. Conflict resolution. If conflicts do emerge, the project manager must facilitate discussions to find a resolution and try to maintain a positive team climate. The last point mentioned here, team building. So team building activities could also be beneficial in this project to strengthen team relationships and boost morale. So last sort of slide to talk about the control, about the execution aspects. The control aspects we'll come to in a moment. Also under execution aspects, there's a very strong likelihood that we'll need to implement approved changes. There'll be some changes that inevitably often occur in projects, and we need to do that in a controlled and an approved manner. So implementing approved changes is a common part of the execution and control phase in EU-funded research projects. Despite careful planning, circumstances can change, new information can emerge, and adjustments may be needed. The process typically involves reviewing and approving the changes, communicating them all to stakeholders, and updating the project plan accordingly. So if we think of our case study on researching sustainable agriculture methods, we may experience methodology changes. If the initial field trials suggest that the new irrigation method isn't as effective as expected, it might be necessary to modify the method. This change would need to be documented, approved, and communicated to all stakeholders. Location changes. If a planned trial site becomes unavailable or unsuitable, it might be necessary to select a different site. This change would need to be approved and communicated to all stakeholders. Staff changes. If key team members leave the project, new personnel might need to be recruited, which could involve adjustments to roles and responsibilities, timeline and budget. These changes would need to be approved and communicated to all involved parties. So that's about the execution aspects. So what's now about the control aspects within this execution and control phase? So control, as the name suggests, is about tracking, reviewing, and regulating project progress. It's crucial to do these things in order to ensure alignment with the project plan, detect any issues early, and to take corrective action if necessary. From the perspective of our case study on researching sustainable agricultural methods, so what might we want to do? We might have a project dashboard. This be a simple kind of dashboard. It could be something physical, or it could be an electronic document stored somewhere on the cloud where project members can access. But on this, wherever this project dashboard is kept, it should be visible, and it should be used to key project metrics. So everyone, as much as everybody involved in the project is aware of them. Field visits. The project manager or designated team members, they should make regular visits to the field trial sites to check on progress, resolve any issues, and collect feedback from farmers. Status reports. So regular status reports should be prepared for the funding body, farmer associations and other stakeholders, providing updates on the project's progress and any issues or changes. Data quality checks. So regular checks should be conducted on the collected data to ensure its quality and reliability. Any issues identified should be investigated and addressed. Also within this control aspect, of course, it's not only that we're monitoring, but we need to do some sort of comparison of what our actual performance is with what we had planned. If you do this, it helps ensure that the project is progressing as expected, identify any deviations from the plan, and to take corrective action if necessary. So in the context of our case study on researching sustainable agriculture methods, we should be thinking about timeline tracking. The actual progress should be compared with the planned timeline to check if the project is on schedule. Budget comparison. So the actual spending should be compared with the budget plan to monitor costs and identify any areas of overspending. Data quality measures. The actual quality and quantity of the collected data should be compared with the defined data quality objectives. Farmer adoption. So the actual adoption of the new irrigation methods by the farmers should be compared with the planned level of adoption to see if the project is achieving its impact goals. So last slide about the control aspects, and here we're going to talk about identifying issues and implementing corrective actions. So it's critical to do this, obviously, for maintaining the progress and the quality of the project. If we're thinking about, again, our case study, so what might be the issues and what might be the corrective actions? Well, firstly, there may be field trial problems. For example, if the new irrigation method is not working as expected in field trials, the project team could troubleshoot the problem, identify the cause, and modify the method or the trial setup as necessary. Data quality issues. If the collected data is not reliable or sufficient, the project team could review the data collection process, identify any problems, and improve the process or the training of data collectors. Budget overruns and delays. So budget overruns and delays should be managed by identifying the causes and implementing corrective actions. Farmer resistance. If the farmers are reluctant to adopt the new irrigation method, the project team should investigate the reasons, such as lack of knowledge or perceived risks, and implement measures such as additional training, demonstrations, or modifications to the method. So that's enough for now about execution and control phase. We now move on to say some words about the closing phase. So closing phase, as you can well anticipate, it's about the delivery of the final product or service that our research project has been working on. In the context of our case study, researching sustainable agriculture methods, the final things we'll be delivering will be, for example, method documentation. So the new irrigation method should be fully documented, and the documentation provided to farmer associations and agricultural extension services. This represents the delivery of the final product in the form of a new farming practice that can be implemented. Training programs are another sort of deliverable final product, if you like. The training programs should be developed and delivered to train farmers in using the new irrigation method. This represents the delivery of the final product in the form of a capacity building service. Publications. So we already had this as a quality metric. The research findings should be obviously published in several, certainly one, if not several scientific journals. And then potentially we might want to publish policy briefs. So policy briefs would be short reports. They could be prepared and distributed to relevant government agencies, advocating for the wider adoption of the new irrigation method. Also in this closing phase, we'll need to deal with the release of project resources. So this involves ensuring that human, physical, and financial resources that were tied up in the project are properly closed off, redirected, or reassigned. In the context of our case study, we're thinking of human resources, so the project team members, they would need to be reassigned or their contracts ended. Physical resources, field trial sites, equipment, and other resources used in the project would need to be cleaned up and returned to their original state or reassigned to other projects or purposes. Financial resources, any unspent project funds would need to be accounted for and returned or reallocated according to terms of the funding agreement. And finally, in this sort of closing phase, it's very good practice to document the lessons that you've learned. This involves reflecting on what went well and what could be improved in the future. In the context of our case study on researching sustainable agricultural methods, we might want to consider some of the following. The field trials. The project team could document lessons learned from conducting field trials, such as effective ways of engaging with farmers or strategies for collecting reliable data. Project management. The project manager could document lessons learned about various aspects of project management. Stakeholder engagement. Lessons learned about engaging with stakeholders, such as strategies for motivating farmers to adopt the new irrigation method, or effective ways of communicating with government agencies could be documented. And then lastly, use of resources. Lessons about the use of resources could also be documented. So that concludes for now a sort of overview introduction to the different phases that make up the project lifecycle. Before completing this module 1, I'd like to say some words now very briefly about different project management methodologies, and also, in a way, a repetition, but a very important one about project team members. So firstly, project management methodologies. Just the one slide here about this, but I just wanted to kind of like make you aware, sensitize you that there are different ways to go about managing a project. And arguably, these three listed here are perhaps the most common that one may come across in the context of EU-funded projects. So the first one here, waterfall methodology. This is a traditional project management methodology, which is considered to be linear and sequential. So each phase must be completed before the next one can begin, making it suitable for projects with clear, unchanging requirements and where tasks are dependent on each other. In other words, waterfall methodology is probably realistic, probably the approach you'll come across most in the context of, say, Horizon Europe projects. But another method is this Prince2, or full name, projects in controlled environments. So Prince2 is a process-based approach that provides a detailed roadmap for how the project should be managed and executed. It's widely used in the UK government, but also in various other sectors and countries around the world. And then finally, the third methodology which some of you may well have heard of, agile methodology. I think it's a methodology that certainly in the last 10 years or more has become very, very popularized. So agile methodology is an iterative and flexible approach that allows for regular adjustments through the project. Although it's widely used in software development, it can also be applied to research projects, especially those involving complex tasks, rapid changes, or a high level of uncertainty. So that's very briefly about this project management methodology. If you want to learn more, I suggest you go away and do a search, either perhaps using some sort of generative AI platform like ChatGPT, or doing, say, a search using Google or Bing or something similar. So the very last part of this presentation, in a way, it's a certain repetition. It's about the roles and responsibilities of project teams, but I'm happy in a way to repeat it because arguably the most important thing in a project are the teams, the people who are going to go about trying to implement the project. So just one slide here. In a way, it's a reminder. If you're talking about EU-funded research project team, these are really the key roles that you need to think about. So project manager, she or he is responsible for the overall project management, coordination and delivery of the project on time and within budget. Principal investigator, the lead researcher who's responsible for the scientific and technical direction of the project. Project administrator, they'll be responsible for handling administrative tasks such as financial management, reporting, and compliance with EU funding requirements. Research associates, assistants, they're responsible for conducting the research tasks under the direction of the principal investigator. Stakeholder representatives, these are individuals who represent the interests of different stakeholder groups, often providing valuable inputs, feedback, and support. And then lastly on the slide, dissemination and communication officer. So this person is responsible for developing and implementing a communication strategy, promoting project results, organizing events, engaging with stakeholders, and fulfilling reporting requirements. So, dear colleagues on the SUSNANO project, that concludes today's presentation on Module 1 of giving an overview about EU project management, saying briefly some words about different basics about different EU funding schemes, but then also talking about project lifecycle and the 4 different phases. In the next 2 training modules, Module 2 and then Module 3, I'm going to be going back to the project lifecycle. In Module 2, I'm going to look again at the initiation phase and the planning phase, very much in the context of Horizon Europe. And they're going to give very detailed and very practical examples of things to do, how to go about, for example, if we're talking about the planning phase, which is really about proposal preparation, we get a lot of practical advice and examples to help with proposal writing. Likewise, in Module 3, when I'll be talking about the execution and control phase and the closing phase, I will be very much focusing on Horizon Europe and be giving lots of practical, real-world examples from my past experience about how to manage such projects, how to do the reporting for the European Commission, and so forth. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to presenting training module 2 and module 3 shortly. Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.